Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dental Operations Unpacked. I am your host, Jake Larson, here with my co-host, as always, Clint Berry, and his token two thumbs up smiley face. There it is. And we have some amazing new friends with us today. We are really excited about this episode. We've never had double guests like this, and we're grateful to have both of their perspectives on this topic. We have with us Dr. Jason Gladwell, CEO of Gladwell Orthodontics. We're going to give him a second to introduce himself because he has a lot to his background here just momentarily. And Emily Abecasis, Senior Director of Operations at Lightwave Dental and also Vice President of Business Development at Gladwell Orthodontics. We're super grateful for both of you for taking some time with us. This is going to be a great conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Hey man, long time listener, first time caller. This is fun. They're always good. No, so my background is a little bit different than most people in healthcare. So I was a NC State graduate. Go Wolfpack. We had some troubled times lately, but we got a new basketball coach coming in. Just to mark that. So at NC State, I studied business, marketing, economics, and accounting. Then I went to dental school at Carolina and in residency out at VCU. Obviously, studied orthodontics there. After that, I started my first private practice in 2007. Kind of at that time, thought I was going to be, kind of one doctor, one location, kind of the typical dental dream. And then, as life would have it, went a bunch of different directions and ended up kind of growing with a lot of Emily's help. Gladwell Orthodontics into a kind of multi-location, multi-state kind of brand, and partnered with Lightwave Dental back in 2021, where I've served as the chief orthodontic officer for that company. And we've done a lot of really cool things along the way. Both of us lecture for Invisalign, we're aligned faculty, doing a lot of fun stuff for them. And it's been a very unique ride in dentistry, but a lot of fun along the way.
Awesome. Emily, you want to take a minute as well?
Yeah, I had no interest in ever getting into the dental field
whatsoever. Don't like teeth, but here we are. Now I love teeth, apparently. I have a business degree, and I actually worked for a company called Toll Brothers, the home builders, not the cookie makers. That really throws people off sometimes. But they moved me to North Carolina, and then pretty quickly I switched and left their company to work with Dr. Gladwell. So been here for now 10 years. I was sold a small, we're going to open one practice, one doctor, and just grow it as much as we can. And then within 6 months, we opened 3 other offices right away. So it was a fun ride at that time.
If nothing shows you that I'm good at sales, that in and of itself will show you that we actually do this very, very well.
And then the way I got into sales specifically was a little bit of an interesting story, but I wanted to make some changes at the office, and Dr. Gladwell said that I had to prove that I could do it better first before I could make those changes. I said, hold my beer, and was able to prove that. And then since then have started kind of some national sales training programs that we have run and worked out really well for us. Like you said, we partnered with Lightwave. So I'm a senior director for the ortho division with Lightwave and a aligned faculty member.
We're going to talk about a topic that I have built a career around as well in sales, but how it can oftentimes have a negative connotation inside of dentistry. The topic today is that dentistry needs to get over its sales complex. And for those of you listening, I'm doing air quotes there, right? Because selling can oftentimes have that connotation of being a negative thing, pushy, persuasive. But really at the core of any successful business is a very successful, well-trained sales function that can scale and grow with the organization. So we're really excited to have Dr. Gladwell and Emily and their expertise in scaling Gladwell Orthodontics and helping grow Lightwave, and how having the proper context when it comes to what is selling inside of dentistry has helped them accomplish that. So just one other thing I want to add, I think that there's a lot of teams out there that maybe they feel gut punch or feel kind of yucky when there's anything that feels salesy in the organization. And I don't necessarily think it is the idea that of the significance of sales, that's the problem. I think it's the context around it. So anyway, enough said on kind of introducing the topic. What I want to start with is from Emily, from Dr. Gladwell. Why is it inside of dentistry that sales feels so uncomfortable in that clinical environment? What is it about it that word or that that uncomfortable feeling, where does that come from inside of clinical environments?
I think it starts back with all the way to, healthcare education, right? So this is not just a problem in dentistry, orthodontics, endodontics, periodontics, like any of the dontics. Like this is a major healthcare problem everywhere, right? And it goes back to, when we're all going through dental school, kind of residencies, whatever it is, whether you're in med school, anything like that, you're never taught any business classes. You're never taught anything about, kind of sales or running a business. And at the end of the day, whether we like to admit it or not, dentistry is a small business, right? And you have to, at some level, and hopefully after this, maybe a lot of people will kind of reevaluate that level and treat it differently, but you got to treat it like a small business. So when we're going through the education and you've got, your faculty and your classes and everything is kind of amazingly patient-centric and focused, and it is almost ingrained in you from that standpoint that profit is bad, right? We never talk about that because, profit is associated with taking advantage of a patient when you're in residency and when you're in education. And I think all of us know that it couldn't be further from the truth. If you really want to break it down, the only way that you can actually provide good quality of care for your patients is if your doors remain open, if you have the ability to hire, the team that they deserve to, kind of treat your patients, and that's where running your practice as a small business comes in. But I think it goes all the way back to, kind of the rudimentary education that we have in dental school, in residency, in med school, anything like that. And, they almost go so far the opposite way where, they kind of demonize anything that's associated with business, and with business comes sales. So I think that's where it really starts.
And I think too, from a team perspective, most of them are clinically trained or just wanted to get into dentistry from a clinical standpoint. So sales makes them uncomfortable. They view it as any salesperson that they've interacted with is typically car salesman, or when they go into like a retail store, and they just feel like it's someone hounding them. So I think it's just a misunderstanding of what sales really is. And that at the end of the day, we're actually all selling something at any point in time, whether it's a product, a service, or ourselves. But I think it's just moving past the clinical, okay, yes, clinically, that's what I'm here to do. But in order to provide the best clinical care to a patient, I have to sell them on why it's a good idea for them in the first place. And as long as you really believe in what you're selling, which is what we tell every practice, is don't ever recommend treatment that you wouldn't recommend for your own family member, then there should never be any concern or like hesitation to sell that to a patient.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that as the litmus test.
It really
Anything
is.
that you wouldn't sell to your own family member.
I
seems
say
like
it to
a
every
good,
office.
safe way.
Yeah, if you would do
Yeah.
it for a friend or a family member, do it for your patients and kind of pitch it strongly. If you wouldn't, then you probably shouldn't be recommending that treatment in the first place.
Yeah. So Emily and I, we do a lot of consulting all over the country, do a lot of lectures all over the country. And one of the things that we talk about is if anyone watching this gets one thing out of this entire podcast that we do today, if you were just to replace the word sales with education, the problem goes away, right? And that's how you have to think about it, because all you're doing is, of course we want people to have, a patient-centric mindset, right? We want them to think about the patient first. And if you're educating the patient on what they need, it goes away from being sales and it goes right into education, right? And that's the easiest way to think about it, and easiest way to get teams on board with what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah, I think that in my experience, coaching salespeople and being in that space, there really is a mind shift, because as Emily mentioned, a lot of people hear the word sales and there's pictures from movies and stuff that they've seen, these dirty car salesmen, right? So they kind of have that in their mind that that's what sales is. And really the best salespeople are not that, right? Salespeople are consultative. They have the client or patient's best interest in mind. They take an educational perspective, right? And helping them see the real value of what they're getting. And I love that what you're pointing out there, Dr. Gladwell, that shift, that cultural or that mindset shift away from what is the stereotypical salesman to being a partner, a consultant, an educator to help people be informed so then they can make the best decision for themselves.
Too, like I always tell our TCs, and that's not just for ortho, it applies to kind of all aspects of dentistry, wherever that position is. Most people don't have a high dental IQ. They're coming in and they're getting very confused by whatever the doctor is telling them. Like especially in orthodontics, they understand spacing and crowding, and that's pretty much it. The rest of the terms, they have no idea. And so when a doctor is explaining to them things to them very clinically, it's the TC's job to be that to bridge that gap and to then kind of, for lack of a better word, dumb it down and make sure the patient really understands what the recommendation is, why it's important to them, why it's a good idea for them to move forward with treatment, but also the possible negatives of not moving forward with treatment. And that's how they sell it. It's just about developing a relationship and kind of being like that friend to them in the office that's saying, hey, I know that was overwhelming. I know this is a lot of information, but here's what you really need to know and why you should move forward with it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you know, what every office needs to understand is we're not out there with a rake bringing patients into the practice, right? Patients are coming in to see us because they trust us, they know us, they want to know what we're thinking. And again, that's where the education comes in, right? Making sure that they fully understand all of the treatment that we're recommending and the why, right? And then having the, kind of the confidence to be able to, kind of very concisely break that down for them, as Emily was talking about, and in words they can understand and with meaning that they'll grasp in terms of bringing in, this is what I would do for my own family, really educating them on what treatment they need. Again, that's not sales, that's education, right? And that's what every doctor should be doing across the board, is education to the treatments that a patient needs in their own best interest, and everything else, kind of handles itself at that point.
I want to ask the two of you kind of follow-up question to that. So we've talked about this mindset shift and the importance of it, but I'm curious, when you look at like real life examples that you've seen, offices that you've been in, consulted with, that haven't shifted their minds towards sales being okay and that education and consultative approach, what is the impact that it has when a practice doesn't see sales through the right lens?
Success.
It's so nice. From like what we've seen, and a lot of it too, is those practices that have that mindset also don't track their conversion rate. So they actually have no idea how well or poorly their practice is doing. So one of the big shifts that we make initially is explaining that you have to hold your team accountable and you have to track metrics. And if you don't, then there's really no way to have an accurate like health check of where your practice is at. And when we go into the practices, the ones that don't take it serious and are just kind of, they view dentistry as I'm going to explain it, and if a patient wants to do it, they do it, and if not, oh well. Their conversion rate's typically like 30%. And those patients that are leaving and not getting treatment, it's not that they're not getting treatment at all. They're just not doing it in that office. They're going down the street and finding someone else that's going to make them feel more comfortable and confident in whatever decisions they needed to make. And then they're going to go get the treatment.
Yeah, I mean, like when you're asking like, what are the signs and symptoms of someone that's not doing this? Really and truly, I'm laughing and joking and saying lack of success, but it really is, at the end of the day, lack of success, right? And to Emily's point, what we're talking about is a lot of times when we go in there and look at these offices, they really have no clue. They have no data to back up what they're doing, right? They have an idea of how they feel. And it's like, at the end of the day, they walk home and they're like, yes, I absolutely crushed it today. I was the best doctor in the office and patients loved me. But until you actually dive into the data of actually what happened that day, and then you actually look at it to see kind of what you can change or what you could have done better, you just see a lot of missed opportunities, right? And then, if you start the day thinking that you're the best dentist, you're the best orthodontist in your town, in your area, wherever you are, then you would really want to strive for 100% conversion of all your treatment recommendations, because in your mind, if you're the best, you want everyone to be treated by the best. And if they're going to walk away and your conversion rate is really low, then they're going to go somewhere where they kind of they may get inferior treatment, but it was explained better. They were educated better, right? And that's the kind of the main crux of everything. They weren't sold something. They just left feeling like they had no questions, right? Like all of their questions were answered. They were explained it properly. They understood why they needed the treatment, and they felt comfortable moving forward with it, right? So that's kind of how we see it a lot of times is, people that don't understand this, kind of major principle, they really just don't optimize their practice, and then they're never as successful as they could be, and their patients aren't getting the quality of care they could be if they maybe picked up a different technique here or there.
I think one of the most shocking things that we see is these practices that think that they're successful because they're making $2, $3, $4 million a year, and they're really happy about that, and they think everything's going super well. Then when we explain to them, okay, but what's walking out of your door? Like, what could you really be making? And they realize they could be a $6 to $9 million a year office. And the reason they're not is because of the way they're explaining treatment to patients. So we track every single month, and we recommend it to all of our offices. You need to track what walked in your door. So we call it possible production, like anyone that received a payment option sheet, what was that total? And what did we actually produce? And when you're measuring those two numbers against each other, that's how you can really know, is my practice doing well? Am I educating patients properly? Am I explaining things to them the way that I should be? Because if not, the reality is it doesn't matter how much you're making if you have just the same amount walking out the door.
Yeah, and we're talking about this because the four of us understand when you talk about production and what could you be making, things like that. This is one of the areas where a lot of offices get kind of derailed. Like, they hear, what could you be making? And they see that as a bad thing, right? So when we're in an office and we're explaining it to them, we have to break it down even a step further and say, look, it's not, what you could be making, what you're taking home. That's not the important part. It's, how many treatment plans are you recommending? Again, with a patient first mentality, right? What treatment are you putting out there and what is being accepted? And if that is, if you're putting out 100% and you're getting back, 60%, then 40% of the people, if you're really a good doctor, like you claim to be, and you're really doing the best for your patients, well, then when you look at it that way, then 40% of the patients, if your conversion rate is 60%, 40% of those patients are not getting the care that they deserve to have, right? And so, kind of is on this kind of podcast, when we're talking about it, we can talk about production, we can talk about, kind of what you're making, things like that. But when we're in an office, we really have to make an attempt to make sure they really understand the difference between, kind of what they're making versus the patients that are walking out of the door that didn't get the treatment that we recommended or that we felt like they needed. And so I think that's something that Emily does really well is, when we're actually in those scenarios, making sure the entire team understands the difference between production and kind of how that correlates to patients not getting the treatment that they deserve to have.
One of my favorite sayings when I was coaching sales teams was that the confused mind says no, right? They're not saying no because they don't need the treatment or don't believe in it or whatever. It's just that their mind is confused, and so the natural reaction is to just decline it. But I love what the two of you have said about taking the time to simplify the terminology, to just take the time to make sure that the patient really understands what they need and what they're getting. And when they understand, they're more likely to accept it.
Things that we actually track inside of a new patient exam is, did the doctor make a clear and concise treatment recommendation, right? And you'd be surprised at kind of how many times in offices that we look at, that doesn't happen. The doctor walks out and they think they absolutely crushed it, because we all do, because we're kind of arrogant that way. And we think that we went through everything, right? We think we just absolutely crushed it with a patient. But when a TC actually tracks whether that was a clear and concise and, kind of direct treatment recommendation made, that corresponds, very positively with the overall conversion rate. And we've looked at doctors, whether it's our own doctors or doctors that, kind of we're in consulting with. If they don't make that clear, concise treatment recommendation, the conversion rate goes down. And that, proves exactly what you were just talking about, is you have to make sure they understand the treatment that you're recommending and the why. And as Emily will tell you, kind of, a lot of times why, what happens if you actually don't go forward with that treatment as well. So
But how are you tracking that? Is it by just asking the patient when they're on their way out?
No, the TC has to track it. So our TCs are trained to know like what to look for and what kind of quantifies a strong treatment recommendation, because it's not something you want to ask the patients, because then they're going to question why you're asking this question, and it's going to kind of derail their confidence in the practice. So that one's one of the metrics that we measure that's subjective. But the TCs are trained for it, and they're the other, like the witness in the room to hold people accountable and say, yes, this was made, or no, it wasn't.
And that's why you got to have a really strong doctor-TC pair that has an open line of communication, a lot of trust and honesty between the two people. Because like, I know for a certain, like if Emily and I are TCing together and I miss something, I trust her and know that she's paying attention during that appointment. And in a very polite and professional and reminding way, she's going to remind me that, oh, hey, you've basically forgot this. Like, I'll walk into a consult all the time and I may know you for the last 10 years and we may talk about dentistry 0% of the time. I've already talked to to Emily about the case, but we get talking about our kids, we get talking about the community, we get talking about whatever. And then I'll go to leave and Emily will have to remind me, okay, so Dr. Gladwell, so it's really important they get started right now, or, remind me of what
It's
the
just
TC
about
was.
asking questions that you already know the answer to. So, and I tell TCs this all the time, just because you're asking a question doesn't mean you're bad at your job or doesn't mean you don't already know the answer. It's a reminder to the doctor to repeat it in front of the patient, because sometimes there's certain things that a patient just needs to hear from a doctor. I could say it 12 different times and until I'm blue in the face, but it doesn't carry the same weight that it carries from him. So part of your job is making sure that they've hit every point that you need them to hit. And I think the other piece that really holds some team members back is as soon as they're hit with an objection, they freeze. Like, as soon as the patient has a question or they say, okay, well, I'm just not sure if financially I can make this work, or whatever the question may be. And what I tell everyone, and Jake, it's kind of to your point before of like, confused patients say no. Patients that tell you why they're saying no want you to change their mind. So if a patient's telling you why they can't make it work, they're not telling you just because they're trying to be nice. They're telling you because they want you to find a solution to make that work for them. If they really didn't want to do the treatment, they would just politely decline or tell you, oh, I'll get back to you, and then just ghost you and never call you again. But the ones that are communicating with you and presenting the obstacles to you, it's not just because they're having fun with it. They want you to come up with the solution, and that's your job.
I like that. That's definitely like sales 101 that Jake has been helping me with too, because we started this software business without sales and brought Jake on as a co-founder. And it was eye-opening to him giving me all of these like really simple sales techniques that I had no idea. I love what you just said about objections. If they're telling you why they object, they want you to help solve it. That makes so much sense to me.
It's the whole point, because if they flat out just couldn't afford it or they just didn't want it, they're just going to politely do oh, I have to talk to my husband, I'll call you back in a few days, or oh, we're going to get a second opinion. As soon as they present the actual problem to you, now the ball's in your court and it's your case to lose.
And there's so much psychology in sales, right? And in human nature in general. And people think that it's this ultra complicated, kind of matrix of how you get someone from top of the funnel to bottom of the funnel and converting, but it's really not. Like, there's a couple of, kind of very simple tips and tricks that we teach people, whether it's a doctor, which is typically just make your time in the room as quick as possible, get in and get out and let your TC handle everything, to some more kind of dialed in techniques. But it's some really simple things that we teach that kind of allow people to get past that hump and really realize that it's not as complicated or as kind of hard as you may think it is, because you don't have a sales background, so to speak.
And I think it's important to circle back as we have this conversation about tips and tricks and sales techniques to some of the stuff that Emily said at the very beginning of you're recommending treatment that is in the best interest of these patients, right? You're not pushing anything on these individuals that isn't good for them, that's not in their best interest, and you're partnering with them to educate them, to help them see what they need and why that's important. And at the end of the day, they're still making the decision, right? But you're doing everything that you possibly can to make sure that they are making an informed decision.
You're helping them get out of their own way. And, like the normal decision-making process that a person goes through throughout a day is kind of very arduous, right? It's very hard. And anything that comes up as a roadblock is going to derail that conversation or put it off. And that's just human nature, right? So, kind of when you understand that and you can use some of the, kind of the tips and tricks and just picking up on like what Emily was talking about in terms of if they bring up an objection, they want you to help them solve the problem, and again, as long as you have their best interest at heart, which every good doctor should have that, right? That's kind of the point of being a good doctor. You shouldn't feel bad about that. You shouldn't feel bad about giving your patients the proper education and the tools they need to make a decision that's going to benefit them, right? And as long as you have their interest first, you should never feel bad about that. You shouldn't think twice about it.
So what have you two seen, or what do you recommend to help organizations shift that mindset across the whole group or the whole organization? what would you recommend, or what advice do you have?
My biggest piece of advice is reevaluate the TC position in your practice. Most people absolutely put the wrong person in that role. They put the employee that's been there the longest, or the one that just wants a promotion or a title change and they're afraid of losing them, or their best clinical assistant. I can almost guarantee you your best clinical assistant is going to be your worst treatment coordinator, and they need to stay your best clinical assistant. People view the role as someone that needs a lot of dental background, and I firmly believe the opposite. Because like I mentioned before, the average patient doesn't have a high dental IQ. So when you have a doctor who's very clinical, then you make a TC who's also very clinical in the room, the patient becomes really overwhelmed, and they're never going to develop a really good relationship with that treatment coordinator. You need someone who has more of a sales background, or is just really good at developing relationships and able to form genuine connections with people. That's the best person for that role. Your best assistant needs to stay your best assistant, because that's where they're going to thrive and want to stay with your practice. And I think that's where a lot of practices really kind of mess up the whole process, is they just put someone in there because that person wants the role because it sounds good on paper. And I think people really do underestimate how hard that position is. Like, I tell all of the employees in our practice, because there's so many people that say they want to be a TC. Okay, well, two things are going to happen. One, that means you're working directly with me every single day. So I don't know how you feel about that, but most of them could be scary. But also, it's the only position in the practice that's 100% tied to a number. Like, I can rank our TCs all day, every day, and it's not opinion. It's not about how hard you work. It's just about what results you get. And if you don't have the right person in that role, one, they're going to fail because they're not going to understand how they're being held accountable. They're not going to be able to develop those relationships well. But then you'll lose that employee, which I think a lot of offices do, because they take that best assistant, put them in a role that they're not doing well in. No one wants to stay in a job that they're not succeeding in every single day, especially when they come from being the best. When you come from being the best and then suddenly you're really struggling in a position, that's when you leave and go elsewhere. And that's where a lot of offices, I think, make a big mistake.
Yeah, I think it's following up on that and then going another direction as well. I think it's a fear-based mentality that most doctors have, right? They've got this amazing team member that's worked with them for years, and they can't envision practice without them. And so they just want to elevate them to whatever role, whether they're qualified or not, so that way they don't lose them, right? And so that's operating from a fear-based mentality, which is never a strong position to operate any business from whatsoever, right? So you got to get past that immediately. Then, it sounds crazy, but it's really understanding what your core values are as an office. What are you trying to do as an office? Are you trying to be, kind of the office that's really providing the best quality of care for every patient that comes through your doors? And if it is, understand what comes with that, right? And what I mean by that is understanding that if your core value is to provide the best quality of treatment for every single patient that comes through your door, then you got to offer them that, and you got to make sure you educate them, and you can't be bashful about telling someone they need something. If we're talking about general dentistry and someone needs a crown, we got to explain why they need a crown. If they need an implant, you got to tell them why that's that. If you need Invisalign, we got to tell them why they need Invisalign, or why they need, an exposing balm, whatever that is. You can't be bashful about kind of doing your purpose in your job and in your office. And you have to make sure that you surround yourself with a team that's actually going to help you get to the finish line there. You got to make sure that your team, kind of shares your core values, and they are patient-centric as well. And as long as everybody's doing that, we're all kind of working towards, the same goals, education for those patients becomes second nature, and it becomes just something really positive inside the practice, and then everyone helps. And it's basically like a flywheel inside the practice of conversion, which is, obviously something we all want.
When I go to the dentist, I don't think my dentist even has a treatment coordinator. Is that possible?
That is possible. It's highly likely.
And then they throw like a random person in the room, and all hell breaks loose after that. Because then they don't know what they're doing. You don't know what they're doing.
Last time I went, he did present a treatment plan to me, but he did it himself.
Yeah.
He talked money with you?
Yeah, that's a big no-no for us. Like, that's... Yeah. No doctor should ever talk about money.
He started talking about money.
Yeah. People ask me all the time. Like, it's again, I've got families that I've treated for 20 years, and they'll ask me something financially, and I'll say, look, I don't have a clue. I just work here. Like, you got to talk to my team.
That's literally his response.
Like,
he's like he's trained. That's what he has to say.
I'll just roll out. I'll walk away. Like, I'm not talking about financials, because there's nothing good that can happen when a doctor specifically talks about financials with a patient. right? There's no end line that you can go there. Like, if I walk in and Emily and I do a consultation and I walk out and Emily gets stuck in a situation where she has to come talk to me about some treatment fee or anything like that, she can roll in my office, and 9 times out of 10, we're probably not even talking about the financials, but at least it gives her a reason to go back in the office and then say, hey, look, we worked it out.
Don't give away all my secrets.
We figured this one out.
If you're a patient of Gladwell Orthodontics and I ever said to you, let me go talk to Dr. Gladwell, I absolutely did that. I needed his approval.
We talked.
For sure.
It just wasn't about you. So, which is okay.
I know, half the time I'm like taking a lap, getting my steps in.
What we're sharing, right? There's a process that's trained with this, right? Like if you're going to have this as a part of your culture and something that really lifts, a lot of our listeners are operators, right? So they work in a lot of locations. And I think in order to make this scalable and have this be that full cultural shift across all their organization, there has to be certain guidelines that are trained, like what they've talked about here, where the doctor isn't the one to discuss this. The person, you're getting the right treatment coordinators, the right personalities in those seats. All of these are components that feed into a fully successful sales motion inside of the organization that allows you to be the most successful that you possibly can be. And it sounds like there's a lot of organizations out there that don't see it that way and are just kind of, putting people where they might be successful, right? It's unintentional, and they're leaving a lot on the table because of it.
Like I put guardrails on our TC. So I have 11 TCs that work for me just from a Lightwave, like just in our direct network. And they can't come to me with every question. Like I have to trust them to make certain decisions in a consult and make exceptions when they need to. And if you don't, then you don't have the right people in place. But you just have to put guardrails on them. Hey, you can make decisions up to this amount, or this is the minimum price that you're allowed to go to. Past that, you do need my approval. Otherwise, I trust you to make the right decision, do what's best for the patient and best for the practice.
Yeah, but when you're talking about this, there's a very big difference between systems and dependencies, right? Like, so if you're a real operator and you're trying to grow and scale and even if it's in your own one practice, right? You don't have to talk about scale in terms of multiple offices, multiple locations, things like that. You can still scale your one office, but if everything flows through one person and you don't have a system or training that's in place, you don't have systems, you have dependencies upon one person, right? And that's the big difference between a real operator and a fake operator, right? A real operator has systems in place and trainings in place that allow for these conversations to have, in the practice to keep running without having to go to the bottleneck of one person, right? That's a very important thing that we talk about with a lot of our doctors and a lot of our groups that are there is you got to have the culture, you got to have the team, you got to have the systems, you got to have the buy-in, because you can't get caught on a dependency of just one person. Right? You can't scale one doctor. You can't scale one amazing TC. You've got to have those educational systems inside your practice to make sure that your practice can grow to the best potential it is, even if it's just one location, right? And we see a ton of offices that are one location that are some of those badass offices in the country. Like they are awesome and they know what they're good at, but every part of that office is a system and it runs really, really well.
I absolutely love this. There's so many directions that we could continue to take this. Like I'm curious about the data, how you're tracking all this stuff, the scoreboards and scorecards that I know Emily is using across her treatment coordinators. Like there's so many things that we could just talk forever on this. So we may have to do like a follow-up episode or something someday, or at least sit down for lunch at an event, because I want to pick your brains. There's so many things to do, but I know that time is valuable and you both have been super generous with your time today. So I don't want to get greedy and take too many minutes of your time. But I do want to make sure that we have some time at the end here to give both of you an opportunity to just end with some closing statements. Like what's the one or two things from our conversation or just from your experience that you would want an operator to take away so that they really can start to feel more comfortable with this idea of selling, right? And understand that it really isn't the dirty car salesman persona that we're encouraging you to be, but to be more of an educator consultant. What's the one or two takeaways that you would want operators to leave? Emily, let's start with you, and then we'll have Dr. Gladwell give his couple takeaways to wrap it up.
So I would say the biggest one is treat every patient like they're a family member. And I always joke and I say on the days you like your family and not the days that your family's really pissing you off. Like that's not how we're treating our patients. But when you do that, you're going to make the best genuine decisions for them. Financially, treatment planning, everything. So that's kind of number one. Then my biggest piece of advice from a sales perspective is everyone focuses on why you should do the treatment. These are the positives. This is what you're going to get out of treatment. But people really forget the opposite. You have to also explain what's going to happen if they decide not to move forward with your treatment recommendation. It's the same thing when you go to an MD. Like if they tell you need surgery, it's, hey, this is why, and here's what happens if you don't. Dentistry is the same thing, and people really forget that part of it. So it's making sure you're educating them on the positives of doing treatment, but also the possible negative repercussions of not doing treatment, because then they have the full picture and can make that educated decision. And the biggest piece too, my last piece of advice is when someone's giving you an objection, talk through it. Like that is your opening to keep the conversation going. But you want to be prepared for what those objections possibly could be. So role playing with your teams is super important. Looking up the negatives of Invisalign, negatives of braces, negatives of this, so that you can have prepared, educated conversations, because it's not sitting there trying to prove the patient wrong. It's trying to talk through the patient, because some of the objections that they're going to have are valid. And it's just about explaining to them why the pros outweigh this negative that they're going to potentially have to deal with. But if someone's conversing with you and not just blowing you off, you can absolutely close a sale that day. And that's what you want to do. You want to close the patient while they're in your office, because as soon as they leave, 5 other offices in the area are going to go after them.
Emily, I could listen to your sales teaching or coaching all day. It resonates.
Fortunately
so
for
deeply.
you, it is available for purchase.
Yes, Gladwell
It's,
Practice
yeah.
Solutions. You can do that all day, every day.
I did
There's
not
hundreds
know
of
that they did
hours.
consulting, but I am telling you all right now, if you are looking to improve your case acceptance rates, give Emily and Dr. Gladwell a call, because I can tell you from coaching hundreds of salespeople, they know their stuff. So great.
This is Jake's favorite podcast right now.
This is great. Emily's crushing it. Okay, Dr. Gladwell, give us a couple last things.
Tell me more.
Yeah. No, so I think, again, following up on what Emily said, from the doctor's perspective, right? Number one, patients come first. And I tell every doctor this that we ever meet. And I think this is kind of one of the things that, I did the best in my career. If you keep the patient first in mind, everything else will take care of itself, right? Like that is the number one thing that you do. Always have the patient number one in mind. Everything else will work itself out. And then understand that you have to continuously learn, right? A lot of the issues that we have in dentistry are not your fault. You were never educated. No one ever gave you the tools to do this part of the job the right way. That's literally why we started Gladwell Practice Solutions and GPS. It's basically kind of the master class for dentistry in terms of the business side of it, not the clinical side, right? It's walking, doctors and their teams through how to navigate these waters and how to have these conversations, kind of what tools that you can use inside your practice to really make a difference immediately. And, when you have these doctors and they get kind of down on themselves because they had a bad day, well, it would be like someone that had never played golf before, walking out trying to pick up a club and wondering why they can't shoot par. Well, no shit. You've never had a lesson, right? How could you expect, unless you're like the most freakish athlete in the world, how could you expect yourself to do so well right out of the gates without any teachings? And, I think that a lot of us doctors, kind of have this arrogance where we don't feel like we need help. You don't want to reach out to someone. You don't really look into a mentor, or, a CE group or anything like that. And there's a lot of kind of isolation in dentistry. And if you really want to be kind of the best in your area, the best in your group, you can't do that. You have to continuously learn. You have to reach out to people that have been there and kind of done that and kind of give you some education. But you really kind of have to lean into kind of understanding that you were never trained that way. You have a lot to learn, and you can really treat your patients a lot better by just picking up, kind of some simple education along the way and really transform your entire practice and your entire team, giving them more opportunities.
Dr. Gladwell, what if I play golf all the time and I still stink at golf?
Then you should play with Dr.
Then
Gladwell.
you are me. And we will drink a lot of beer and we'll have a lot of fun and I'll tell you a lot of jokes. It'll still be a great use of 4.5, maybe 5 hours, depending on the day. But yeah, so.
He's that guy that believes the more he drinks on the course, the better he'll get. And I'm like, no, you just forgot how many times you swung.
Yeah, my my groups
That's
would tell
exactly
you that
not
that's
getting
all
better.
true. Yeah, it's all definitely true. Yeah, no. So it's education is really important, especially in an area where so many dentists are very kind of poorly educated and they don't even think about it, right? So we got to change that mindset. They need the help, they need the understanding, and it's not just them. It's a team sport, right? The entire team has to understand that. That's culture, that's buy-in, that's systems, that's education.
So wonderful. This has been a ton of fun, and I think it is a topic much needed inside of dentistry to help people understand something that can be super meaningful to their practice. Like Emily said at the beginning, going from what is a $3 or $4 million practice to potentially 6 to 9, just with these types of this mindset shift and coaching and reaching out. So I'm a fan. I'm going to recommend you guys. You sold me. I honestly didn't even know that you had that consulting part of what you did. So this is awesome. So anyway, thank you both for joining us today. This has been great. We really appreciate everybody joining us today, listening in. Real quick, Emily, Dr. Gladwell, before we leave, how could people get a hold of you if they want to learn more? What would be the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can what we'll do is we'll send you kind of a link to our website, GladwellPracticeSolutions.com.
It's the best option.
Easiest way. Or you can hit us at Gladwell@GoMediaNC.com or Emily@GoMediaNC.com.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will catch you all next time on another episode of Dental Operations Unpacked.